Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Rosendale, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for assembling this panel. It's a very informative group here today. Like the representative from Oregon, prior to arriving here, I was responsible for regulating an agency myself, the Securities and Insurance Agency in Montana, and I discovered a lot of subjective language which lent itself to the delays and increased costs, not only for business, but that translates into increased costs for the consumers as well. I do think that the clarification of necessary rules and the repeal or elimination of rules that merely generate paperwork is extremely helpful. And I did so when I was the insurance commissioner in the state of Montana. Ms. Gamma, thank you so much for coming here today. I appreciate it. In Montana, we have so much untapped potential when it comes to undeveloped energy resources, particularly in oil and gas sector. Much of this stems from the reasons that you've outlined in your testimony, namely overregulation and significant NEPA delays. The BLM's nearly unlimited discretion when it comes to, and I quote, every lease, permit, and any other oil and natural gas decision on federal lands has made it close to impossible to actually break ground on any of these projects. I'm currently working with this committee in consultation with partners in the private sector to introduce a bill, as you say, to clarify leasing minerals. That interior must hold quarterly lease sales where the lands are available. My question for you regarding that is, what else, in your opinion, is the agency likely to come back with to slow down or stop this process, as leasing does not necessarily translate into permitting and production?
Yeah, right now we're seeing a situation of the Interior Department is ignoring its obligations under the Mineral Leasing Act. So I appreciate language to clarify that quarterly actually means quarterly. But they're now using their justification as the Inflation Reduction Act, which is great because at least they have an incentive to lease oil and gas because wind and solar permits are tied to it. But they're starting to play games with the numbers. So the IRA is very clear on 50% of lands nominated need to come up for sale before a wind and solar permit can be issued. But they're playing games on how to count that. And so I don't want to get into the weeds on that, but I do appreciate that you're willing to clarify that language.
Sure.
In your bill.
So as this goes directly to how else can they block our every move here and continue to keep American energy from reaching its full potential and force us to rely on these foreign entities?
Well, we're proud that we produce it more sustainably on public lands than anywhere else because there's so much more regulation and process on public lands. So when we don't produce it from federal lands, we're getting it from overseas or somewhere else where it's not done as sustainably.
Very good. As a follow-up to that, turning now to reforming NEPA delays and the extremely litigious and effective nature of these organizations against this industry regarding NEPA, you mentioned in your testimony that about 6,000 leases are currently being defended due to increased greenhouse gas NEPA analysis. 6,000. Furthermore, you highlight that Congress has not passed any law requiring a carbon budget or the social cost of carbon, yet these leases are still being held up to the NEPA process regarding this criteria. So my question here is very similar to the first one. How can we anticipate and prevent the NEPA process from continuing to be weaponized against those who try to acquire leases for energy resource development and any NEPA clarification that we pass?
I think legislation that would clearly state what type of greenhouse gas analysis is necessary. Because it's very easy right now in court to get a judge to say not enough greenhouse gas analysis was done. And BLM is struggling with this. So the project or the NEPA that Ms. Johnson mentioned regarding leasing, that wasn't because the NEPA wasn't followed or public didn't have input. That's a mischaracterization characterization of NEPA. It's because it's almost impossible not to get a judge to find that there's some deficiency in the NEPA. So no matter how hard and how much BLM studies it, environmental groups are going to continue to sue on greenhouse gas analysis until the analysis results in an answer that says absolutely no oil and gas should be developed because greenhouse gas emissions are created. I mean, we all know that using oil and natural gas creates greenhouse gas emissions, but until there's an alternative that does everything that oil and gas does, just using NEPA to say no greenhouse gas emissions can be emitted from a project, that's not reality. That's shutting down our sources of energy using the NEPA process. So judges can find deficiencies in the NEPA. It gets sent back to BLM to redo that analysis. And we're working with BLM to get that analysis to a place where it can be. Sorry for the long.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Scama. And Mr. Chair, I yield back. Thank you.